With that, I'm glad to announce our first speaker for our third session, Jack Ziziak, Executive Chairman and CEO of Recovery Point Systems. Jack, it's great to have you here. Please take it away.
Great, David. Thank you very much. And I appreciate the warm introduction. And thank you, everybody, for taking your time out of a busy Friday and at the end of the week and this Friday afternoon. As David said, my name is Jack Ziziak. I'm the CEO of Recovery Point Systems. Many of you may have heard of Recovery Point Systems, but let me give you a very brief overview of who we are and what we do. We've been providing disaster recovery as a service for several decades. And in fact, we are one of the very few pure play providers of disaster recovery as a service in the world today. We provide DRAS services across multiple platforms of infrastructure, from x86 and mid-range power systems all the way up to mainframe, and all the integral pieces required to make those production systems run, and for those production systems to be recovered in a predictable and a trustworthy form. Our pure play focus is really around delivering disaster recovery and delivery excellence, and providing surety of testing and recoverability. And we think that is absolutely critical as ransomware disasters proliferate, as they replicate, and as they continuously pose significant threats to our customers' production environments. Just a couple of metrics over there on the left, and a little bit about us on this page. We have over 120 customers for our disaster recovery as a service capabilities across a wide range of service offerings, many of which I will be talking about in my brief comments today. But really, to get to the heart of the matter, from our perspective, cyber resiliency really requires proactive measures, not necessarily in addition to the reactive measures during a breach. And from our perspective, business continuity and disaster recovery planning is proactive, it's iterative, and it's all in the context of an increasingly shifting and evolving threat plane, and the continuous prioritization that's required of critical systems, applications, and business processes of the enterprise in order to ensure that the enterprise itself can be recovered in the event of a ransomware attack or of any cyber breach, for that matter. A couple of metrics that I think we're all familiar with to various degrees, as you can see here. 73% of companies worldwide have paid some form of ransom to recover their data. About the average cost of a data breach in the United States alone is approaching $10 million and clearly rising. And to date, about 93% of ransomware attacks are explicitly targeting backups, getting to the core crown jewels in an enterprise from a threat perspective. Now, these are all fairly obvious metrics, and we see these in practice every day. However, a couple of other points to make. Proliferation of threats is very real. The threat vectors change continuously. A number of the speakers that have gone before me have gone in great detail about that. And the proliferation of solutions that directly address the threats have grown as well. Going back to my previous comments about the reactive nature of many cybersecurity tools in today's enterprise, what we're really focused on is the proactive nature of protecting oneself from the after effects of a ransomware attack or of a cyber event. So many of these tools out there today do not necessarily ensure the recoverability from the damage done by a threat itself, and we think that's an important thing to note. Like many people in today's industry, our delivery capability, particularly around ransomware recovery as a service, it revolves around the NIST cybersecurity framework, and our DRAS solutions are placed across many of the elements of the cybersecurity framework that NIST has developed, particularly around protection and access control and data security, the detection of anomalies and threats, particularly as they reside and dwell in certain aspects of an enterprise estate, and then obviously ensuring the recoverability post-attack or even during an attack is very crucial. And this kind of guides the motions that we take in the marketplace today. what do organizations have in order to have a cyber resiliency plan? For many, many years, disaster recovery has been seen as a necessary evil, a necessary thing to do with respect to maintaining the integrity of an enterprise infrastructure estate. Many times those were updated annually. In many instances, they don't exist. And so DR planning really can't be taken for granted. The importance of preparedness in the face of a cyber threat is critical. And preparedness really hits on not just incident response procedures and data backups and regular check-ins around things like Active Directory, et cetera, but ensuring that your backups are immutable, that they're offline, that they're frequently updated, that you're testing for dwell time, that you're scanning those backups and you're scanning that environment, and also that the employees themselves are educated around the threats of cyberware within the enterprise and taking appropriate steps in order to protect the estate from cyber attacks. Honestly, I think as we look at recovery and as our posture continues to be positioned more and more towards the threat associated with ransomware, we continue to be alarmed at the inconsistency of preparedness across multiple industries for the ability to recover from a ransomware attack. And we think that's a very important opportunity for today's enterprise to truly pay attention to. Now, traditional disaster recovery and what we characterize as ransomware disaster recovery really have a number of things in common. And I think this graphic may fail to really talk to the complexity associated with traditional DR. Traditional DRAS itself is a complicated orchestration process. And it's really born of a broad, fulsome plan around business continuity. Being able to orchestrate the recovery of an enterprise IT infrastructure, regardless of the platform it sits on, is a complicated affair, not just because of the complicated nature of that enterprise platform, but because of the multiple locations in which it may sit, the multiple providers who are delivering that production service, the multiple constituents who have a stake in the game in ensuring that that production environment is recoverable. Likewise, from a ransomware perspective, a couple of the factors to take into consideration around recovery are the vast unpredictability surrounding the timing, the duration, the frequency of ransomware attacks. 20 years ago, disaster was really predicated on things like hurricanes or the odd event that may be happening to a server or to a data center location. And in many instances, they were fairly predictable. We see ransomware recovery and cyber threats as really looking more having the pattern of an EKG, up and down with increased frequency, and no real way to predict when the next attack might happen. And so clearly, the ability to stop the attack, engage in forensics and collect evidence, restore and scan, and drive negotiation decisions are key. But the overlap between these two worlds really focuses on disaster recovery planning, assessing the impact that a disaster can have on the enterprise IT infrastructure, but also prioritizing those bits of the infrastructure, the estate, the applications, and the business processes that are most important for recovery. And that, of course, translates down into a fulsome DR plan and frequency of testing, which is a really critical element from our perspective in terms of ensuring recoverability from a ransomware attack. There's many ways to look at the anatomy of an attack, and you can read this in terms of how things tend to play out. But from our perspective, recovery itself is complex. Orchestrating recovery becomes wildly difficult if preparedness for recovery versus reaction to the immediate attack is taken for granted. And that's why we position ourselves and we work with our customers to position the recovery plan as a proactive and iterative process, which can condense the timelines for that demand rapid RTOs or recovery time objectives or recovery point objectives in the place of accelerating attacks in the enterprise. Our approach to cyber resiliency really takes kind of three elements: prepare, recover, and remediate. And it's very much of an iterative approach. This requires continuous improvement on the planning cycle, ensuring that a business continuity and disaster recovery plan exists, that it's been updated, that it reflects the incident response and ransomware planning that have been tackled by many of the MSSPs in today's world, and management of the inventory of those IT assets and the prioritization of those IT assets to ensure that they are recovered in sequence and are reflective of the importance that those assets represent in terms of the business. That translates into delivering playbooks, driving immutability of backups onto the floor of your recovery partner, in this instance, recovery point systems, and air gapping and protecting those environments from future intrusion, from continuous intrusion. As we get into the recovery process, from our perspective, we operate on the same mantra that the military operates on. If you train like you fight, you will fight like you train. And so from a recovery perspective, continuous testing is key. Where are the weak points in your recovery plan? That will expose the weak points in the resiliency plan and will help prioritize the systems impact analysis and prioritize where the risks are in your business as it relates to the cyber threat. And then lastly, remediation. A lot of what we do from a testing process really falls back on the after action report. What did we test for? How did we succeed? Where are the weaknesses in the testing plan? And how do we improve that testing plan for the next time so that when the real thing, God forbid, happens, we're prepared. So failback and migration back to production environments and continuously testing that failback modality and that methodology is truly crucial for the survival of the enterprise in today's ransomware and cyber resiliency world. So ransomware recovery as a service, from our perspective, we deliver this as a comprehensive solution that's engineered to address the complexities across the enterprise IT waterfront. And you can see a number of the components there, but from our perspective, I'm going to focus on a couple of things. Ransomware readiness gap. You're going to hear us talk constantly about the readiness of the enterprise. Is the plan there? Is the plan updated? Is it reflective of the most recent snap to today's production environment? Has that production environment been scanned? Do you understand what the threat vectors are towards that production environment? All of those things feed into a ransomware recovery plan. Immutability of backups is a crucial element, and air gapping those backups from future intrusion, scanning those backups to ensure that there's no ransomware threat that's been dwelling on those backups before you mount them back into a recoverability environment to then bring your production environment back up to delivery. And then automating and orchestrating those recovery processes is key. For many years now, we've been dedicated to automating the testing procedures, driving discovery back into the production environment to ensure that the recovery environment has fully mapped the production environment as it currently stands, and such that it is not infected or not compromised by any existing cyber threat. A real brief comment on things like clean room. From our perspective, we look at clean room as a disaster recovery bubble that allows us to isolate and test cyber resiliency in DR plans and really look to this as an environment for analysis that complements other preventative measures, such as pen testing, tabletop exercises, and the like. Likewise, you've heard me talk a little bit about immutability. What is immutability? These are data copies that simply cannot be modified, right? And that's the job of the customer. That's the job of the enterprise to ensure that immutability, A, is done, and that it's adopted as part of your everyday motions in protecting the enterprise environment. It's a necessary precondition for a successful, safe, and secure ransomware recovery as a service environment. Lastly, the resiliency console and my earlier comments on testing automation. Providing visibility in real time as to how the test is proceeding, to understand where the gaps are between the test and the recovery plan, and to ensure where those vulnerabilities are. It's predicated on the automation of testing procedures, which helps ensure a rapid recovery, which is crucial when you're in the throes of attack and driving down to your targeted recovery time objectives or your recovery point objectives. Lastly, and before I take questions, what I'll leave the audience with is an offer. We have a free readiness assessment to help focus cyber recovery initiatives within the enterprise. I'll leave this slide up for the Q&A, and I would encourage you to schedule a readiness delivery session by scanning the code on the screen. So that concludes my comments. I'll open it up to questions that the audience may have.
All right. Great presentation, Jack. We have time for some reading questions. And I'll do first come, first served. So starting at the bottom in the console, if you want to follow along, Jack and team. So the first question reads, how do organizations prioritize their response efforts following a ransomware attack, especially when dealing with data loss, system downtime, and financial implications?
That's a great question. From our perspective, it's crucial to continuously update not just the business continuity plan, but to have a systems impact analysis that's continuously refreshed. The systems impact analysis will basically match the business imperatives and the business priorities with the systems that are under threat or that are subjected to threat. It's a critical element that informs the disaster recovery plan. It's one that we encourage all of our customers to engage in on a regular basis as part of its continuity planning procedures.
Okay, we're running out of time, so let's just answer one more question. Can you provide some tactics around dealing with ransomware dwell times?
Sure. And I'll also ask my colleague Jeff Judy, who I believe is on to answer as well. Jeff, do you want to dive in here?
Sure. Can you confirm you can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Jack, all right, thank you. Yeah, so you said tactics around dealing with ransomware dwell time. A lot of times, or really what we talk to clients about is planning for restorations from backup and protecting those backups. Dwell time could go even longer than 30 days. Clients are like, how long should I maintain my backup sets? And it really depends on what is relevant to your company. At what point is the data no longer useful to restoring your applications? So you'd want to retain to that point. And dwell time could still be a factor there where the attacker may have been lying in dormant state. So your systems, your backups may still be infected, but not encrypted. And so as long as you have that immutable copy that you can restore from, you can initiate your incident response plan. You can sanitize those backups that were not encrypted and begin to restore your business.
Thank you so much, guys. We're out of time, but if we didn't get all the questions, or if you still have one, put them into the console right now, and we'll get them over to Jack and the team.